She's wasting our bullets. The soldiers laughed as Sarah missed every target. Women can't shoot. But when the range officer whispered, "Check the targets with this magnifying glass," their laughter died. In the center of each target was one perfect hole, 40 bullets through the exact same spot. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The hot desert sun beat down on Fort Bradley's rifle range as Sergeant Rodriguez blew his whistle. "Listen up," he shouted to the group of soldiers standing behind the firing line. "Today's qualification shoot determines who gets recommended for combat deployment. Standard Army marksmanship test, 40 rounds at different distances. Miss the minimum score and you'll be stuck behind a desk." Among the soldiers stood Specialist Sarah Chin, a small woman who looked almost fragile next to her male counterparts. At 5 feet 4 inches with a slight build, she seemed out of place among the bigger, more muscular soldiers. She quietly checked her M4 carbine with practiced movements, adjusting her helmet and gear with precision. Corporal Jenkins, a broad-shouldered man with an arrogant smile, nudged his friend Private Torres. "Great," he whispered, looking at Chin. "They're really letting anyone try for combat arms now." Torres looked confused, so Jenkins nodded toward Chin. "That girl there. Sweet enough, but she's gonna waste half our ammunition budget missing targets. Women just don't have the upper body strength or hand-eye coordination for precision shooting." Private Martinez joined their conversation, eager to fit in with the older soldiers. "My cousin's a drill sergeant," he said quietly. "He says female recruits need twice as many tries to hit anything past 50 meters. It's just biology, they're not built for this kind of work." Rodriguez's voice boomed across the range. "First relay, move to your firing positions. Load and make ready." The soldiers spread out along the concrete firing line. Chin took position 7, right between Jenkins and Martinez. She lay down in the prone position, carefully adjusting her rifle sling and checking her sight alignment through the scope. "You will fire 10 rounds at 100 yards, prone supported position," Rodriguez announced. "Shooters, you may begin firing when your target appears." Mechanical targets popped up downrange like jack-in-the-boxes. The sharp crack of rifle fire filled the morning air as spent brass shells cascaded onto the concrete like metallic rain. Chin fired methodically, her breathing controlled and steady. Each shot was deliberate, timed with her natural respiratory cycle. She seemed completely focused, blocking out everything around her. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez watched the targets downrange. When he looked at Chen's target, he frowned slightly. "Position 7's not looking good, Williams," Rodriguez said to Staff Sergeant Williams, the range safety officer. Williams was an experienced soldier with calm eyes who had seen everything during his 15 years in the Army. He took the binoculars and studied Chen's target for a long moment. He said thoughtfully. "Interesting technique." "Cease fire. Cease fire," Rodriguez shouted. "Make your weapons safe and step back from the firing line." The soldiers ejected their magazines and cleared their rifles. Jenkins immediately grabbed a spotting scope and looked downrange at the targets. "Holy shit, Chin." Jenkins laughed loudly. "Did you even hit the paper? I can barely see any holes in your target." Martinez joined in the laughter. "Maybe she needs glasses," he said mockingly. "Or a different job, maybe something in the kitchen." Torres tried to be diplomatic. "Come on guys. Everyone has off days." But Jenkins wasn't having it. "Off days? This is supposed to be her qualification test. If she can't hit a man-sized target at 100 yards, how is she gonna handle herself when bullets are flying in combat? She'll get us all killed." Chin said nothing. She simply reloaded her magazine with smooth, practiced movements that spoke of countless hours of training. Her face remained calm and emotionless, but those watching closely could see her jaw tighten slightly. She had heard every word, but she didn't respond to the insults. "Second relay. Move to the 200-yard line," Rodriguez commanded. "Assume the kneeling position." The soldiers gathered their gear and moved to the next firing position. Chin adjusted her rifle sling for the kneeling supported position, using her body to create a stable platform for accurate shooting. 10 rounds kneeling supported at 200 yards, Rodriguez announced. "You may begin firing when targets appear." The targets popped up again, but now the challenge was greater. The kneeling position was less stable than lying down, and the targets were twice as far away. Chin fired with the same deliberate rhythm, her breathing and trigger control perfectly synchronized. Jenkins finished his shooting quickly and immediately grabbed binoculars to check Chen's target. "You guys have to see this," he called to Martinez and Torres. "She's not even close. The target's practically clean, No bullet holes anywhere. Martinez shook his head in disgust. Maybe we should say something to Rodriguez. I mean, she's wasting ammunition for nothing. This is taxpayer money she's burning through. Torres looked uncomfortable. That's not really our place, man. But Jenkins was getting more agitated. Our place? Dude, in real combat her bad shooting could get us all killed. This isn't some diversity program, this is life and death training. Chin continued methodically cleaning her rifle between shooting sessions, running a bore snake through the barrel to ensure accuracy. Staff Sergeant Williams approached her position. How's your zero, Chin? He asked quietly. A rifle's zero refers to how it's sighted and whether the bullets hit where the scope is aimed. Zero's solid, Staff Sergeant, Chin replied with quiet confidence. Williams studied her carefully. You sure about that? I can have you re-zero on the 25-meter range if you need to adjust your sights. Chin met his gaze steadily. Negative, Staff Sergeant. My zero's good. Williams looked at her for another long moment, then nodded. Carry on, Specialist. There was something in his tone that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. Final relay. Rodriguez shouted. Move to the 300-yard line. Standing position, no support. The soldiers groaned collectively. The 300-yard standing position was the most challenging part of the entire qualification. Even experienced marksmen struggled with this distance and position combination. Without any support, shooting accurately at 3 football fields away was incredibly difficult. Chin moved to the 300-yard line and assumed the proper standing position. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, her weak side elbow tucked firmly under the rifle, creating bone-to-bone support that would minimize muscle tremor. It was textbook perfect form. Jenkins couldn't resist another comment. This should be entertaining, he said loudly enough for Chin to hear. She can't hit paper at 100 yards, now she has to shoot 300 standing. This is gonna be a complete disaster. Martinez nodded in agreement. I almost feel bad for her. Someone should have stopped this before it got embarrassing. Torres just shook his head. Why doesn't Rodriguez just end this? It's painful to watch. This is your final string, Rodriguez announced. 20 rounds, standing unsupported, 300 yards. Make them count. The targets appeared downrange, looking impossibly small at that distance. Chin settled into her stance, controlled her breathing to a steady rhythm and began firing. Her shots came at precise intervals, not rushed like some of the nervous soldiers but not hesitant either. Each shot followed the same deliberate process. Sight alignment, sight picture, respiratory pause, smooth trigger squeeze and follow-through. She seemed to be in her own world, completely focused on the fundamentals of marksmanship. The other soldiers finished shooting quickly, eager to see their scores and get out of the heat. Chin continued firing methodically, seemingly oblivious to the stares and whispered comments around her. Some soldiers were shaking their heads in pity, others were making jokes about her performance. Jenkins checked his own target with binoculars and whooped with excitement. Damn. I shot a 34 out of 40. That's expert level. Martinez scored 32, and Torres managed 31, all respectable scores that would easily qualify them for their combat military occupational specialties. As Chin fired her final shot, the range fell silent except for the desert wind. She made her weapon safe, ejected the magazine and cleared the chamber. Standing up from her shooting position, she brushed the dust off her uniform and waited for the scoring to begin. All shooters, weapons clear and safe. Rodriguez commanded. We'll walk downrange to score targets. The group began the long walk to the target line. As they walked, the jokes and comments about Chen's performance continued. I bet she didn't hit the target frame, much less the actual target, Martinez said. This is what happens when you lower standards to be politically correct, Jenkins added. Combat doesn't care about your feelings, it only cares about whether you can shoot straight. They reached the 100-yard line first. Rodriguez began calling out scores as he examined each target. Position 136. Position 231. Position 328, needs remedial training. He continued down the line until he reached Chen's target at position 7. Rodriguez held up Chen's target and examined it closely. There were only a few visible holes scattered around the edges. Position 7. He paused, looking confused. The target looked almost clean. Jenkins couldn't contain himself. See, I told you guys. She completely missed. Look at that target, it's practically untouched. But Staff Sergeant Williams was studying the target more carefully. He took it from Rodriguez and held it up to the light, examining it from different angles. His experienced eyes noticed something that the others had missed. There was one hole, just one right in the center of the target. But it was perfectly round and clean, as if it had been made by a drill rather than a bullet. Interesting, Williams said quietly. Rodriguez, let's check the 200-yard targets. They moved to the next distance. Again, Chen's target appeared to have very few holes. Rodriguez held it up, looking puzzled. I don't understand this. It's like she barely hit the paper. The mocking continued as they walked to the 300-yard line. This is just sad, Jenkins said loudly. She shouldn't even be here. This is a waste of everyone's time. But Williams remained quiet, studying each of Chen's targets with growing interest. At the 300-yard line, Rodriguez pulled Chen's target from the frame. Like the others, it appeared to have very few bullet holes. The soldiers gathered around, ready to see the final confirmation of what they believed was a complete failure. Well, Rodriguez said, holding up the target, this is... He stopped mid-sentence. Williams took the target and held it up to catch the desert sunlight. His eyes widened as he examined the paper more closely. Rodriguez, Williams said quietly, do you have that magnifying glass in your range bag? Rodriguez fumbled through his equipment and handed over a small magnifying glass used for close target inspection. Williams examined the center of the target through the lens. His face went pale. He looked at the target again, then at Chen, then back at the target. The other soldiers were getting impatient. What's the holdup? Jenkins demanded. Just give her a 0 and let's get out of this heat. Williams ignored him and walked over to Chen. Specialist Chen, he said quietly, what ammunition are you using? Chen reached into her ammo pouch and handed him an empty brass case. Williams examined it carefully. It was standard 5.56mm NATO ammunition, nothing special about it. What's your rifle serial number? Williams asked. Chen rattled off the numbers. It was a standard issue M4 carbine, the same weapon everyone else was using. Williams looked confused and impressed at the same time. Staff Sergeant, what's going on? Rodriguez asked impatiently. We need to score these targets and get the next group ready. Williams held up Chen's 300-yard target and pointed to the center. Rodriguez, look at this target through the magnifying glass. Look very carefully at the center bullseye. Rodriguez took the glass and examined the target. His jaw dropped open. Holy shit, he whispered. Jenkins was getting angry. What the hell is going on? Just score the damn targets. Williams looked at him with a slight smile. Jenkins, you said Chen was missing the targets completely, right? Jenkins nodded confidently. Yeah, she couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Williams held up Chen's 300-yard target. Take a look through the magnifying glass at the center of this target. Go ahead, take a close look. Jenkins grabbed the magnifying glass and examined the target. The color drained from his face. In the very center of the target, in the X-ring that marked the highest scoring area, was a single hole. But it wasn't just any hole, it was perfectly round and slightly larger than a normal bullet hole. Jenkins realized what he was seeing. Chen hadn't missed the target at all. She had put multiple bullets through the exact same hole, creating what marksmen call a one-hole group. That's impossible, Jenkins stammered. Nobody can shoot that accurately. Not at 300 yards standing. Williams smiled grimly. Look at her 100 and 200-yard targets with the magnifying glass. Go ahead. With shaking hands, Jenkins examined Chen's other targets. Each one showed the same impossible result, a single, perfectly round hole in the center of the bullseye, slightly larger than normal because multiple bullets had passed through the same point. Martinez grabbed the magnifying glass next. His face went white as he saw what Jenkins had seen. She put every single bullet through the same hole, he whispered in disbelief. At all three distances. That's not humanly possible. Torres took his turn with the magnifying glass and nearly dropped it in shock. The evidence was undeniable. Chen had achieved something that even Olympic-level shooters would consider miraculous. She had fired 40 rounds and put them all through virtually the same point of impact at 3 different distances. Williams looked at the stunned soldiers. Gentlemen, you just witnessed something that most people will never see in their entire military careers. Specialist Chen just shot what we call a perfect score. Not just 40 out of 40, but 40 rounds through essentially the same hole. Rodriguez was still staring at the targets in amazement. In 20 years as a range instructor, I've never seen anything like this. The level of skill required to do this is... He shook his head, unable to find words. Chen stood quietly through all of this, her expression unchanged. She had endured the mockery and insults without responding, knowing that her performance would speak louder than any words. Williams approached her with obvious respect. Specialist Chen, where did you learn to shoot like this? He asked. Chen's voice was quiet but confident. My father was a competitive shooter before he joined the military, Staff Sergeant. He taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. I've been competing in precision rifle matches since I was 12. Williams nodded slowly. What's your civilian shooting background? Chen straightened slightly. National Junior Champion 3 years running, Staff Sergeant. I hold the current record for high-power rifle in my age group. I was training for the Olympics before I enlisted. The revelation hit the other soldiers like a physical blow. Jenkins, who had been so confident in his assumptions, looked sick. Martinez stared at the ground, unable to meet Chen's eyes. Torres seemed to be processing the magnitude of their mistake. Williams continued his questions. Why didn't you say anything when they were? He gestured toward the other soldiers. Chen's response was simple and dignified. My performance speaks for itself, Staff Sergeant. I don't need to justify my abilities to anyone. Rodriguez was still examining the targets with the magnifying glass. Chen, why did you make it look like you were missing? Why didn't you spread your shots out so we could see them better? Chen's answer revealed the depth of her skill and discipline. I was taught to aim for the same point of impact every time, Sergeant. Consistency is the foundation of precision shooting. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I was just shooting the way I've been trained since childhood. Williams looked at the other soldiers who were still in shock. Gentlemen, let this be a lesson about making assumptions. You saw what you expected to see instead of what was actually happening. Specialist Chen just demonstrated a level of marksmanship that most of us can only dream of achieving. Jenkins finally found his voice, though it was shaky and filled with shame. Chen, I owe you an apology. We all do. What we said was wrong and stupid and... He trailed off, unable to adequately express his regret. Chen looked at him calmly. Apology accepted, Corporal. But remember this moment the next time you're tempted to judge someone based on assumptions rather than evidence. Her words were spoken without anger or bitterness, but they carried a weight that made all of them uncomfortable. Martinez stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment. I feel like an idiot. All that stuff I said about women not being able to shoot. I was completely wrong. Chen nodded acknowledgement but didn't rub salt in the wound. Williams addressed the group. Today you learned something more valuable than marksmanship scores. You learned that skill, dedication, and talent don't always look the way you expect them to. Chen didn't need to prove anything to you, she was just doing her job to the best of her considerable ability. As they walked back from the range, Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. Chen, I have to ask, what made you decide to enlist instead of pursuing Olympic shooting? Chen's answer surprised them again. I wanted to serve my country, Sergeant. Olympic medals are nice, but using my skills to protect people seemed more important. Her simple statement highlighted not just her exceptional ability, but her character and values. Williams made notes on his clipboard. Chen, I'm recommending you for advanced marksmanship instructor school. With skills like yours, you could teach others what real precision shooting looks like. Chen nodded respectfully. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I'd be honored. The group reached the parking area where their vehicles waited. The other soldiers moved slowly, still processing what they had witnessed. Jenkins approached Chen one more time. Chen, can I ask you something? She nodded. How long have you been dealing with people underestimating you because you're a woman? Chen considered the question carefully. Since the first time I picked up a rifle, Corporal. But I learned early that the best response to doubt is performance. Let your actions speak louder than your words and eventually people listen. As they loaded their equipment, Torres asked, Chen, weren't you angry when we were making those comments? I would have been furious. Chen smiled for the first time that day. Anger affects your breathing and muscle control. Both are essential for accurate shooting. I learned to set emotions aside and focus on the fundamentals. Besides, I knew that my performance would answer all your questions better than any argument could. Rodriguez gathered the group for his final comments. Today's lesson extends far beyond the shooting range. In combat, you need to trust your teammates completely. That trust can't be based on assumptions or prejudices, it has to be based on demonstrated capability and proven performance. He held up Chen's targets again. Specialist Chen just demonstrated capability at a level that most of us will never achieve. More importantly, she maintained her professionalism and discipline even when facing unfair treatment. That tells me everything I need to know about her character. Williams added his thoughts. In my 15 years in the Army, I've seen a lot of good shooters and a lot of good soldiers. But I've rarely seen someone who combines exceptional skill with exceptional character the way Chen just did. You can all learn from her example. As the soldiers prepared to leave, Chin cleaned her rifle one final time. The weapon that had seemed inadequate in her small hands had just delivered a performance that would be talked about on the range for years to come. Jenkins approached her as she finished packing her gear. "Chin, I want you to know, if I ever find myself in combat, I'd be proud to have you watching my back." Chin looked at him seriously. "Corporal, that's all any soldier can ask for, to be judged by their ability to do the mission. Today was just qualification. The real test comes when it matters." Her words reminded them all that the range was just practice for the ultimate test that soldiers might face. As they drove back to the barracks, the silence in the vehicle was heavy with reflection. Each soldier was processing not just what they had witnessed, but what they had learned about themselves and their assumptions. The story of Chen's impossible shooting performance would spread throughout the base within days. But more importantly, the lesson about judging people by their performance rather than their appearance would stick with everyone who witnessed it. In the end, Chen had done more than qualify for combat deployment. She had demonstrated that excellence comes in many forms, and that the quiet professional who lets their work speak for itself is often the most dangerous opponent and the most valuable teammate. The range officer's whispered instruction to check the back wall had revealed not just extraordinary marksmanship, but a profound lesson about assumptions, respect, and the true meaning of military excellence. Sometimes the most devastating response to mockery is simply doing your job better than anyone thought possible. Chen's perfect score was entered into the range records, but her real achievement was changing the minds and attitudes of her fellow soldiers. In a profession where trust and mutual respect can mean the difference between life and death, that transformation was worth more than any medal or commendation. As the sun set over Fort Bradley's rifle range, the targets were reset for the next day's training. But the lesson learned that day would last much longer. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, and true strength doesn't always announce itself with loud words or boastful claims. The range had been the scene of many qualifications over the years, but few had taught such a powerful lesson about the danger of assumptions and the value of letting performance speak louder than prejudice. Chen's impossible shooting had silenced her critics more effectively than any argument ever could.